In a quiet countryside manor, an old family portrait hangs on the wall. But every generation, someone in the painting vanishes and dies within a week. Now, the heir notices his own eyes in the frame have gone black. And the ghostly figures in the background, they're no longer watching. They're turning to face him. This is not a ghost story. It's a countdown. Asterisk. The portrait had hung in the Blackwell Manor for over 150 years, unchanged, unchallenged, and unervingly alive. It depicted 5 generations of the family gathered in the grand parlor. Stern patriarchs, elegant matriarchs, and children with eyes too knowing for their age. But there was a rule, whispered only at funerals. Never look too long at the painting after sunset, because every few decades, someone in the frame would vanish. Not fade, not blur, but disappear completely, as if they'd never existed. And within 7 days, that person would die. No illness, no accident, just gone, like a candle snuffed in the dark. The current heir, 24-year-old Daniel Blackwell, had always dismissed it as superstition, until the morning he walked into the study and saw his own face in the painting with empty, blackened eyes. He hadn't posed for it. No one had added him. Yet there he was, standing beside his late grandfather, expression frozen in silent dread. That night, the wind howled through the estate like a warning, and from the hallway, the faint creak of the portrait's frame turning toward his bedroom. Daniel tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a trick of the light or a restoration error. He called the family archivist, an elderly woman named Mrs. Greaves who'd worked for the Blackwells since before he was born. "You've been painted in," she said, voice trembling over the phone. "It means the house has chosen you." She refused to say more, hanging up abruptly. That afternoon, Daniel examined the portrait under daylight. His figure stood slightly apart from the others, as if he didn't belong. Worse, the background, once a blur of bookshelves and velvet drapes, now showed shadowy figures standing behind the family. Their faces were indistinct, but their eyes followed him. He stepped back, heart pounding. When he looked again, one of the figures had turned its head, just a fraction, toward him. That night, he dreamt of standing inside the painting, trapped in oil and silence, while the ghostly watchers closed in. He woke gasping, sheets soaked in sweat, and the portrait's glass was fogged, as if someone had breathed on it from the other side. He covered the portrait with a heavy velvet drape. But that night, he heard scratching, soft, persistent, from behind the fabric, like fingernails on wood. He didn't dare look. Instead, he slept with the lights on, door locked, rosary wrapped around his wrist. At dawn, he found the drape on the floor, neatly folded. The portrait was uncovered. And now, his painted self wasn't just staring, he was smiling. A cold, hollow smile that didn't match his real face. Panicked, Daniel searched the attic for records. Buried in a trunk lined with mothballs, he found a journal dated 1891, written by his great-great-grandfather Silas Blackwell. The first entry read, "Asterisk, the painting feeds on blood. One must vanish so the rest may live. Do not let it choose you." Asterisk further pages described rituals. Burning sage, sealing mirrors, never sleeping facing the portrait. But the last page was torn out, except for 3 words scrawled in shaky ink. Asterisk, it's already watching. Asterisk. As Daniel closed the journal, the lights flickered. From downstairs, the grandfather clock struck 13 times. Daniel knew he had less than a week. He tried everything. Salt lines across doorways, holy water sprinkled on the frame, even calling a local medium who refused to step past the gate. "That painting isn't haunted," she said, pale-faced. "It's a prison, and you're already inside." Desperate, he took a photo of the portrait with his phone. When he zoomed in, he saw something new. The ghostly figures in the background weren't just turning. They were reaching. Long, skeletal fingers stretched toward his painted form, as if pulling him deeper into the canvas. That night, he woke to the smell of oil paint and turpentine. His hands were stained with pigment, crimson and black. On his bedroom wall, scrawled in the same colors, were the words, Asterisk, you belong here. Asterisk, he scrubbed his skin raw, but the stain wouldn't fade. And when he checked the mirror, his reflection's eyes were darker than before. Not fully black yet, but getting there. He realized with horror, the painting wasn't just predicting his death. It was converting him, turning him into part of itself, one brushstroke at a time. On the 5th day, Daniel stopped eating. He barely slept, afraid he'd wake up inside the frame. He nailed the study door shut and boarded the windows. But the portrait didn't need doors. That evening, he found himself standing in front of it, though he didn't remember walking there. His painted eyes were now completely black. And the ghostly figures? They were no longer in the background. They stood beside him in the painting, hands on his shoulders, mouths open in silent screams. He tried to scream too, but no sound came out. His voice was gone, absorbed into the silence of the canvas. Back in his room, he stared at his hands. They looked flatter, less real, like a photograph losing depth. He grabbed a knife and slashed his arm. No blood, just thick, dark paint oozing out. Tears streamed down his face, but even they left oily streaks on his cheeks. He understood now. The painting didn't kill its victims. It replaced them, and he was almost finished. Only 2 days left, until he vanished from the world and lived forever in still life. On the 6th day, Daniel stopped looking in mirrors. His reflection had grown too thin, like a sketch barely pressed onto glass. When he passed windows, his outline blurred at the edges, as if reality couldn't hold him anymore. He tried to leave the house, but the driveway stretched endlessly, the gate always just out of reach. The trees whispered in a language of rustling canvas and drying paint. Back inside, the portrait now dominated the study wall. Not because it was larger, but because the room itself seemed to shrink around it. That night, he heard voices from the painting. Soft, overlapping murmurs of past victims, all calling his name. "Join us," they sighed. "It's quieter here." He covered his ears, but the sound came from inside his skull. He stumbled into the kitchen, desperate for proof he was still real. He dropped a glass, it shattered on the floor. But when he looked down, the shards were painted fragments, not glass. Even his pain felt flat, like a memory of pain. He sank to his knees, whispering, "I'm still me." But the words left his mouth as brushstrokes in the air, visible, then gone. He found an old family Bible in the library, its pages brittle with age. Tucked between Psalms and Proverbs was a folded note in his mother's handwriting, the only one who'd vanished without being in the portrait. She'd written, "Asterisk, the painting lies. It doesn't preserve the family, it consumes it. The only way to break the cycle is to destroy the frame, not the canvas. Burn the wood. Free the souls trapped in the border." Asterisk hope flared in his chest. For the first time in days, something felt real. He rushed to the study, grabbed a fireplace poker, and smashed the ornate wooden frame. Splinters flew like screaming teeth. But as the last piece cracked, the painting didn't fall. It floated midair, edges glowing faintly red. From within, the ghostly figures turned toward him. Not with pity, but hunger. The canvas rippled like water. A hand, slick with oil and shadow, reached out and grabbed his wrist. Cold seeped into his bones. He tried to pull away, but his arm was already half submerged in the painting, colors bleeding into his skin. "No!" he cried, but his voice came out as a dry scrape, like a brush on raw canvas. Daniel's body began to dissolve at the edges, his fingers fading into brushstrokes, his hair blending into the background swirls of the painting. He could feel the canvas breathing, pulling him in like quicksand made of memories. The other figures watched silently, their hollow eyes filled with resignation. He realized they weren't evil, they were prisoners just like he was becoming. With the last of his strength, he yanked his arm back. Skin tore like wet paper, leaving behind a smear of pigment that pulsed like a heartbeat. He collapsed on the floor, gasping, his left arm now half real, half painted, fingers stiff, nails blackened with dried oil. He crawled to the fireplace, grabbed a log, and lit it with trembling hands. Fire, Real fire. He staggered back to the study, torch in hand. The painting recoiled, its surface rippling in fear. "You don't get to choose me," he growled, voice cracking like old varnish. He thrust the flame toward the canvas, but the moment it touched, the fire turned blue and went out. The house groaned in response, walls cracking like drying plaster. Portraits in every hallway began to shift, eyes turning, mouths opening in silent unison. Daniel knew then, the painting wasn't alone. It was the heart of a network, a living gallery feeding on Blackwell blood for generations. And now it sensed his defiance. Shadows pooled at his feet, thick and viscous, climbing up his legs like tar. He stumbled backward, but the floorboards softened beneath him, becoming canvas. His shoes sank in. He looked down. His feet were gone, replaced by smudged outlines in ochre and umber. Panic surged, but even his fear felt distant, filtered through layers of varnish. He remembered his mother's note. Asterisk, burn the wood. Asterisk, not the canvas, the frame. But he'd already destroyed it. Unless the true frame wasn't wood at all. It was the house. The manor itself was the border trapping the souls. And the only way out was to burn it all. He ran to the kitchen, doused curtains in kerosene, struck a match. As flames licked the walls, the portrait screamed, a sound like tearing silk and breaking glass. And for the first time, the ghostly figures inside it smiled. Flames engulfed the manor, orange and furious, but the portrait remained untouched, hovering in the center of the inferno, calm as a stone in a storm. Daniel stood in the front yard, watching his home burn, his half-painted arms smoking in the heat. He should have felt relief. Instead, he felt incomplete. The ghosts weren't freed. They were waiting for him, because the ritual demanded balance. One soul must always remain in the frame to anchor the others. His mother had escaped by never being painted, but he'd already been claimed. As the roof collapsed, the portrait floated gently toward him through the smoke. It landed at his feet, unharmed. The glass was gone, the canvas warm, and his painted self stared back, not with fear but invitation. Behind him, the fire died unnaturally fast, as if snuffed by invisible hands. The night fell silent, too silent. He looked down at his real hand. It was fading. He knew then, running hadn't saved him. It had only delayed the inevitable. He knelt, reached out, and let his fingers sink into the paint. The canvas welcomed him like a long-lost son, and the final brushstroke was his own. When Daniel opened his eyes, he was standing in the parlor. Not the burned ruin outside, but the one from the painting. Richly furnished, dustless, frozen in time. The air smelled of beeswax and old roses. Around him, the ghostly figures stood motionless, no longer reaching, no longer screaming. They simply watched. His body felt solid again, but wrong, too smooth, too still. He looked down. His clothes were now part of the portrait. Velvet coat, high collar, boots polished to a mirror shine. He touched his face. No stubble, no pores, just perfect painted skin. A grandfather clock ticked in the corner, though its hands never moved. On the wall, the family portrait hung as always. But now, Daniel stood among them, eyes dark, expression serene. Behind him, the background had changed. Where once there were bookshelves, now stretched an endless corridor of identical portraits, each showing a different Blackwell air at the moment of their surrender. And in every frame, the same hollow eyes stared back. He wasn't dead. He was preserved, trapped in eternal stillness, forever part of the lie that kept the house alive. Days passed, or what felt like days. Time had no meaning here. Daniel tried to speak, but his voice emerged as a faint rustle, like canvas shifting in wind. He walked through the manor, but every door led back to the parlor. Every window showed only the same moonlit garden, painted in perfect, unchanging detail. He found his mother's journal on a side table, open to a new page he hadn't seen before. In her handwriting it read, "Asterisk, if you're reading this, you chose to stay. But the cycle isn't broken. It's waiting for the next heir, for the next choice." His heart sank. He hadn't ended the curse. He'd become its guardian. That night, if it could be called night, he heard a car engine outside. Headlights swept across the painted garden. A moving truck. A young couple stepped out holding hands. Their son, a boy with curious eyes, ran ahead, stopping at the gate. He looked up, directly at the attic window, and Daniel, standing in the portrait, felt the first tug of the painting's hunger return. It was already watching the next one. The boy's name was Ethan. He visited the manor every afternoon, drawn by its eerie beauty. He'd press his face against the study window, peering at the portrait inside. "Who are they?" he asked his father once. "Just old relatives," came the reply. But Ethan knew better. He saw the way Daniel's painted eyes followed him. One rainy evening, he left a drawing on the porch, a crude sketch of the house, with a stick figure waving from the attic. The next morning, it was gone. In its place lay a single dried rose, identical to those in the painted garden. Daniel watched from within the frame, guilt gnawing at his painted soul. He wanted to warn the boy, to scream, "Run!" but his mouth wouldn't move. The painting allowed observation, not interference. Still, something shifted. The background behind the family began to blur slightly, as if the canvas sensed a new possibility. And for the first time in decades, Daniel felt a flicker of something long buried. Hope. Maybe Ethan wasn't just the next victim. Maybe he was the key. Ethan returned with a camera. He took photos of the portrait from every angle. When he developed them at school, something strange appeared. In one shot, Daniel's hand was raised, not in greeting, but pointing toward the lower right corner of the frame. Ethan zoomed in. Beneath layers of paint, barely visible, were words scratched into the wood beneath the canvas. Asterisk, break the glass. Speak my name. Asterisk, his heart raced. That night, he snuck into the manor through a broken basement window. Moonlight spilled through the study windows as he stood before the portrait. He hesitated, then whispered, "Daniel Blackwell." The air grew cold. The painted eyes blinked. Slowly, deliberately, Ethan grabbed a fire poker and smashed the glass covering the frame. Shards fell like frozen tears. The moment the last piece hit the floor, the portrait rippled violently. Daniel's painted form pressed against the surface, mouth opening in a silent plea. Behind him, the ghostly figures recoiled, as if freed from a spell, and the canvas began to peel at the edges, revealing not wood, but darkness. Endless, hungry darkness. A low hum filled the room, the sound of 1,000 trapped breaths finally released. The ghostly figures in the background dissolved into mist, whispering thanks as they faded into the walls. But the darkness behind the canvas pulsed, growing larger, hungrier. Daniel's form stretched toward Ethan, fingers almost breaking through the surface. "Take my hand," his voice echoed, not from the painting, but from inside Ethan's mind. "Before it takes you too." Ethan reached out, trembling. The moment their fingers touched, memories flooded him. Generations of Blackwells vanishing, the patriarch who started the ritual, the truth that the house wasn't haunted by ghosts, but by something far older that fed on grief and bloodline loyalty. The painting was just a cage, and the real monster, it lived in the space between brushstrokes. As Daniel pulled him closer, Ethan realized, saving Daniel meant stepping into the frame, but staying meant becoming the next anchor. He had seconds to choose, and the darkness behind the canvas was already reaching for him. Ethan didn't pull away. Instead, he stepped forward and pressed his palm flat against the canvas. The surface gave like wet silk, then swallowed his hand whole. Cold fire raced up his arm, burning not with heat, but with memory. Every Blackwell who'd vanished, every silent scream trapped in oil and varnish. He saw Daniel's final moments, not as surrender, but as sacrifice. He'd stayed to protect the next heir. And now, Ethan understood his choice wasn't between life and death, but between chains and freedom. The darkness behind the painting surged, tendrils of shadow lashing out like whips. But Ethan didn't flinch. "Your name is Daniel Blackwell," he said aloud, voice steady. "And you're coming home." The words struck the canvas like a key turning in a rusted lock. A crack split the portrait down the middle, not from force but from truth. And through it, Daniel stepped out, pale, trembling, but real. The moment Daniel crossed into the real world, the manor groaned as if in pain. Walls cracked, windows shattered inward. The painted garden outside wilted into gray ash. The darkness behind the canvas shrieked. A sound that wasn't sound, but pure absence, before collapsing in on itself like a dying star. The portrait crumbled to dust, leaving only an empty frame hanging crookedly on the wall. Daniel fell to his knees, gasping, tears cutting clean tracks through the soot on his face. He looked at his hands. Flesh, blood, pulse, real. Ethan helped him up, heart pounding. "It's over," he whispered, but Daniel shook his head, eyes wide with dread. "No," he said, "it's just sleeping. It always sleeps, until the next air comes close enough to touch the frame." Outside, dawn broke over the ruins. Birds sang. The world moved on. But in the attic, a single drop of black paint fell from the ceiling and landed on the floor with a soft plink. They left the manor that morning, never looking back. Daniel stayed with Ethan's family for weeks, then months, slowly relearning how to be human, how to eat without tasting paint, how to sleep without dreaming of stillness. But he kept one habit. Every night at midnight he checked the mirrors, just to be sure his reflection blinked when he did. Years passed. The Blackwell estate was sold, then abandoned again after strange rumors spread. Whispers of figures seen in upper windows, of portraits appearing where none had hung before. Ethan grew up, became an artist himself. He never painted people, only landscapes, empty houses, open doors. One winter, he received a letter with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, stained with what looked like old oil paint. On it, written in shaky script, asterisk, "Thank you for remembering my name. Don't let them forget yours." Asterisk, he burned it that night, but the smell of turpentine lingered for days. Decades later, an elderly Ethan returned to the ruins. The manor was little more than stone foundations and ivy-choked chimneys. He brought his granddaughter, Lily, 10 years old, curious, with eyes too knowing for her age. She wandered ahead, stopping at the edge of what once was the study. "Grandpa," she called, pointing to a pile of rubble. "Why is that frame still hanging?" He froze. There, nailed to a splintered beam, was the original portrait frame, rusted, broken, but intact. And inside it, nothing, just air. Yet as Lily stepped closer, the space within the frame seemed to darken, to deepen. Ethan grabbed her hand and pulled her back. "Don't look too long," he said, voice rough with memory. That night, back in town, Lily woke at 3:17 a.m. She walked to her window and stared at the distant woods where the manor stood. In the moonlight, she could have sworn she saw a figure waving from an attic window that no longer existed. And in her dream, a voice whispered, asterisk, "Your turn soon, asterisk." The cycle never truly ends. It only waits, in frames, in mirrors, in the quiet spaces between heartbeats. The house may crumble, the names may fade, but the hunger remains. It feeds on memory, on legacy, on the foolish belief that blood makes you safe. And every generation, someone new stands too close to the portrait, long enough to be seen, long enough to be chosen, long enough to become part of the still life. So if you ever pass an old manor with a single empty frame in its window, don't stop, don't stare, and whatever you do, don't whisper your name, because somewhere in the silence, something is already painting you in.